I'm very, very pleased to kick it off, and I'm even more pleased to introduce to you a friend and brother, Pat Gallagher from the Steelworkers, who's going to set this off on the right foot, talking a little bit about the Little Steel Strike, and also want to add that Pat Gallagher is the president of the North Shore AFL-CIO, and so I'm triply glad he's here. I am honored to introduce to you Pat Gallagher, United Steelworkers.
As a steelworker, I'm very proud to be here today and address you and talk to you a little bit about the Little Steel Strike, which had a really lot to do with the formation of the United Steelworkers. Got to go back in history a little bit in the labor movement. The labor movement was initially founded by what's known as crafts unions. They were more or less the higher level of artisans that were in our country. At the time, there wasn't a lot of automation. Everything that was built and manufactured was done by hand. It took great skill and great training to do this, and that's why these craftsmen had the upper hand in organized unions in our country, and they were first. They were the ones that formed the American Federation of Labor. In the start of the Industrial Revolution, and automation came in and machinery in the early part of the last century, and industrialization became stronger. A lot of people became involved in industrialization and working in plants and factories like steel mills, like auto plants, like rubber plants. What happened then was there was a great push to organize them. In 1919, there was a group of AFL unions that got together and they formed the Iron and Steel Organizing Group. They tried to organize. There was a general strike. About 300,000 people that worked in steel mills went on strike then, and it wasn't very successful. Eventually the strike was broken, people went back to work, and they maintained a non-union presence. Now what the steel companies did, they copied the pattern of the mine companies, and they had what they known as employee representative unions. And they were just company unions, controlled by the company. They had stooges that were set up as the leaders and spokesmen. And they really didn't have an equal voice, a separate voice. It was just the voice of the company being replayed and giving the workers the feeling that they were represented to have a voice when they really didn't. The CIO was formed in 1935, and John L. Lewis, who was from the mine workers, decided that we needed to organize wall-to-wall units, not just craft people with skills, but the common everyday labor, and a person who didn't have an apprenticeship, didn't have training, and that worked in the steel mills, worked in the tire plants, and worked in the auto plants. So they organized what's called the Steelworkers Organizing Committee. And his lieutenant, a man by the name of Philip Murray, who became the first president of the United Steelworkers, was chosen to head SWAC, what was called SWAC. When SWAC was formed, U.S. Steel dominated the steel industry. They had over 50% of the steel production in the country was by U.S. Steel. They controlled everything. The target was U.S. Steel by SWAC, and what had happened is the CEO of U.S. Steel decided that it wasn't worth the strike, it wasn't worth them going out and taking this union on, so they signed an agreement with SWAC, and actually were the first ones to recognize us. After that, we went to Jones and Laughlin, which was also based in Pittsburgh at the time, and we demanded a card check with them, and the card check was successful. So Jones and Laughlin also became organized with SWAC. At that time, there was what was called the Little Steel Companies. It was Bethlehem, Republic, which was headquartered here in Cleveland, Inland Steel, National, and Youngstown Sheet too. They were like appalled that U.S. Steel would roll over to these union organizers and give them recognition. And they were determined they were going to break SWAC. There was a man by the name of Thomas Girdler. He was the head of Republic Steel. He was the one who organized the plan with the other steel companies and took control and tried to break the Little Steel Strike of 1937. The strike was barely a couple days old when there was a gathering of all type of steel workers in South Chicago on Memorial Day, what we call the Memorial Day Massacre. And it was a peaceful demonstration. People brought their families, there were many children there, and it was just like a little celebration. Towards the end of the day, they moved across a field closer toward, about a half a mile away from the plant, moving closer towards the plant. The story is that a policeman fired a shot in the air, and then 2 other shots were fired, and all of a sudden the crowd opened up and shot into the crowd and threw tear gas and all kind of other things to try to destroy the crowd. 10 steelworkers were killed, murdered, 30 were injured, were shot, another 50 were injured. We think to believe that what actually happened was when the policeman fired a shot in the air, that was a signal for somebody else to take 2 shots, so give them the excuse to shoot into the crowd. That's, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, you don't believe that. We do believe that that happened because that's the ruthlessness and the intent that the little steel companies were using to try to break the union. They wanted to show their big brother, U.S. Steel, that they were stronger and tougher and could take over the business and also control their workforce. We also had a lot of violence in Massillon, Ohio. I believe 3 people were killed on a picket line in Massillon, 2 in Youngstown. So there was a lot of people were killed during the little steel strike. Unfortunately, the little steel strike wasn't successful. Towards the end of the year, we called it off. I think 78,000 steel workers were on strike. Eventually, they all went back to work. But it was a very important part of our history because it led to a development of a different strategy. Rather than take out everybody, we targeted one company. And that company we targeted was Bethlehem Steel. And what we were doing at that time, what SWAC was doing, I shouldn't say we, I wasn't there, but it's what SWAC would do is they would target a certain plant and they would have a strike for maybe a week or 2 weeks and then go back to work. Bethlehem finally got tired of this disruption and allowed an LRB card check election, which we won handily. In the next couple days, Inland, National, Republic, and Youngstown Sheet and Tube all had card check elections, which SWAC was recognized as a collective bargaining agent for our workers. And then this was in 1942 when steelworkers were formed, and it's the basis of our union today. So the little steel strike, though it wasn't successful, taught us a lot of things on how to deal with corporate America. Things we're facing in a different manner today. The out-and-out violence and the out-and-out audacity that they have isn't there, but they're working behind the scenes now to try to destroy working people in the labor movement. And Thomas Girdler, he's just like the Koch brothers of the 21st century. That's what they're trying to do, the working movement and working people. He's trying to destroy us through their strategies. I believe things like worker suppression, redistricting, now the right to work push in Ohio, is all a concentrated plan to destroy the rights of working people and to take away the balance. What we in the labor movement believe is that, we believe in a capitalist system, but it's got to have strong social safety nets and strong labor movements to balance out the power that corporate America has. And without them, they'll just run amok and destroy the lives of working people, lower standard of living. So it's important to know where you're going. You got to know where you've been before you know where you're going. And it's important that we learn the brutality that was part of the little steel strike. Maybe it's not as obvious today, but it's still part of how corporate America treats working people in the labor movement. And I want to thank everyone for attending here today and hope I didn't bore you too much. And thank you again for your attention.